morning. I am calling the Senate Subcommittee on Ethical Conduct to order. Today is Wednesday, June 12th at 11:03 actually, and this meeting is regarding the actions of Senator Nicole Mitchell. Just for context, members, we returned to revisit the complaint against Senator Mitchell. The plan for today is to receive an update on the status of the criminal proceedings from counsel. Then we would discuss how we would like to proceed. And at this point, I do not intend, as we did send out a notice, I do not intend to take testimony from the parties to the complaint or from the public. And with that, Ms. Stengel, please provide us with a brief update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mitchell's omnibus hearing that was originally scheduled for June 10th was continued until July 1st. Since the subcommittee's meeting in May, to my knowledge, there have been no court hearings and no orders have been issued in this matter other than the one related to the continuance of the omnibus hearing.
So it sounds like to me that as a result, there's been no significant updates on or any new information to present at this time. Would that be fair to say, Ms. Stengel?
Mr. Chair, from the perspective of things going on in the court, the only things that have been going on are the parties have been engaged in discovery, but that's not something that the subcommittee would be privy to.
All right. Members, now let's discuss our next steps, or if you have some questions for Ms. Stengel that would be appropriate at this particular time. Any members? Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Stengel, can you confirm too, there's also a separate hearing that was held where parties were seeking for the release of body cam footage, and I know those arguments were held up at court there. My understanding is we've not yet gotten a ruling from the judge on that. Is that your understanding too, or do you have an update on that piece as well?
Ms. Stengel. Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Matthews. I checked the online filings this morning, and that case is Alpha News versus City of Detroit Lakes, and as of this morning, there were no opinions issued in that case.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Members, any other questions? Well, any thoughts about what our next act should be? Senator Kunish?
Thank you, Senator and Chair Champion. I am thinking that as we have nothing in front of us, we have no new information or changes, that we would perhaps decide to go ahead and conclude for the day, as we don't really have anything to speak of, and perhaps find another day to meet after Senator Mitchell has a hearing. So,
Senator Kunish, is it your motion that the subcommittee defer action on this matter till, is there a specific date, or is there a date that works for everyone? Senator Kunish.
That would be my motion. Thank you, Senator Champion.
And just to make the matter or the motion complete, any suggestions from anyone around the table as to a new date or date certain in July that we should meet? Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Ms. Stengel said that the court hearing is on Monday, July 1st. If that's correct, I would recommend that we meet on Tuesday, July 2nd.
Any other thoughts? My only thought to that is that I'm not available after the 1st just because it's a holiday week, and I would ask you at least consider as a part of this motion maybe July 8th or July 9th, or if any of those times work for anyone.
Mr. Chair, I am out of town I'm out of town the week of July 8th.
Any other suggestions? I know that the whole idea is that we are not trying to push it out. We're just trying to make sure that the schedules work. Any other thought as to the week of the 15th? Any ideas? I am available the Monday the 15th. Senator Matthews.
Mr. Chair, I am out of town that whole third week, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. I totally understand scheduling. And again, I'm saying for the record that we're not pushing it out because we're not wanting to gather, but we're just trying to make schedules work. Anytime on a week of the 22nd, July 22nd, I'm available on the 22nd.
And Mr. Chair, I am out of town that week.
Oh, okay.
At a conference that entire week. So I apologize. The other dates, I the other weeks I think I can make it, but
Okay, so we're now at the week of July 29th. Any thoughts about that week? Senator Miller?
Well, I mean, Monday, July 29th is a pretty big day here in St. Paul because WWE Monday Night Raw is going to be in St. Paul, so that's a pretty big deal.
It is, and my sons would say that too, because they love it.
Senator Champion and Senators, would there be any availability on July 25th? Because I am out of town again on the 26th, almost all of August.
Any availability on July 25th? Senator Miller, Senator Matthews seems to work, and it works for you. I will make that date work. So let's talk about a time. Would we like to do 9 o'clock just to get here early, or any thinking? I also want to be respectful of if we are going to have anything else, like any other testimony, just to make sure that we have it at a time that makes sense. Senator Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a 2-hour drive, and I generally go to work before I leave.
So that's fine.
So if we could do like 10 or 11 a.m., that would work.
So
best
would
for me
11
if
o'clock?
it worked for the rest of the
I'm
group.
sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No problem.
Okay, so does 11 o'clock work for you, Senator Miller? How about for you, Senator Matthews?
Yes.
Senator Kunish?
Yep.
Okay, so let's schedule it for July 25th at 11 a.m., and hopefully we can get it done in this room. It looks like I have Mr. Ringstrom who wants to say something, so let me do this. So, Mr. Ringstrom, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I realize that the subcommittee has made a determination as to when the next hearing is going to happen. I think it's important so that everyone understands where this case will be on July 25th. I anticipate on July 1st that either a motion will be filed pursuant to the rules of criminal procedure, or a not guilty plea will be entered, or possibly both. In either of those instances, by July 25th, this case will not be substantially advanced to the point that there would be new information. There might be information that there was a not guilty plea or a specific motion, and again, I defer to this subcommittee as to how it does its business. But in terms of actionable information about development of the case, it's unlikely to occur by that point. It is my opinion, and it's only my opinion, but of course this is all that I do is practice criminal defense, that final judgment in this case, whatever that may be, is probably several months away. So if that is a triggering moment for this body, we probably aren't going to see that until this fall, November, December. Of course, it could be earlier, but that is my experience.
So, Mr. Ringstrom, thank you, and I do practice criminal defense, so I understand that, both on state and federal, the state and federal level, but I'm also managing the interests of this subcommittee as well, so thank you for that input. We are now going to vote on the motion.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Senator Miller.
Okay, thank you. I do not practice criminal law, but I do have a question related to the body cam footage. Does this committee have the authority to subpoena the body cam footage?
Ms. Stengel, to that question, is my understanding we probably don't for the body cam information, but I'll leave that to council. Ms. Stengel.
Senator, or Mr. Chair and Senator Miller, I think probably not, but I don't know. There are some subpoena powers, but because it's involved in a criminal case and there are laws that govern access to data, body cam data, I don't know the answer to that, but I can look into it and then provide an answer to the subcommittee.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. And then, Mr. Chair, Ms. Stengel, my understanding based on some earlier discussion is there is another case pending that may release that body cam footage. So even if we don't have subpoena authority, that footage may be available prior to July 25th. Is that correct?
Ms. Stengel?
Mr. Chair and Senator Miller, that is correct. If that case is resolved and there is an opinion and that body camera footage is released to the public, that could happen before July 25th, and I don't know the timeline for that opinion.
Very good. Thank you.
And Senator Matthews, just before you say something, but that's also why we're looking to schedule it for July 25th. So if there are any new dates, then we can get that information at this time, because anything you ask us now is speculation. Even with the defense attorney, lots of things can happen between now and then. And so even though it was unsolicited information or advice that we got from him, we still will receive it nonetheless. So Senator Matthews.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with that. I understand a little bit of that criminal procedure process on the judicial calendaring side of things. And I wanted to also note, I'd ask our motion to include, like we did at the end of May when we set today's date, and then put in the motion that we would give ourselves the flexibility to set an earlier date if new information became available. I'd ask that we do that again in this case, and I know July dates might be tough to come by here. We at least have this as a backstop of July 25th. But we don't know when the ruling on the body cam footage may come out, and this committee might decide that it warrants a hearing potentially yet within this month, maybe not. But I would ask the committee, there have been some changes with, certain members of the legislature have made calls for resignations, a party chair, some political dynamics have shifted. The legal dynamics are what they are here. And I would agree that it still does warrant at least having a July 25th meeting to revisit what we know at that time, and there could definitely be information that is worthy of our attention and work in this committee. So I understand the criminal proceedings still may not be much further along than they are today, but as we highlighted in the last hearing, we operate on a very different track. We're not here to focus on and determine guilt or innocence of those criminal charges. We're here to discuss whether there's probable cause for an ethical violation under our Senate rules, and that definitely could have actionable items by July 25th. So I would ask the committee to consider our motion being the July 25th date at 11 a.m. or allow us the chance to call a meeting sooner should this committee deem it necessary.
Thank you, Senator Miller. And members, before we get to the motion, I do want to say that we want to make sure that we get any and all information that's relevant for this committee before the committee in the event that there is something that comes up. One of the things that I would caution us to is not to allow other thoughts of party leaders or anyone else saying someone should resign. That is that person's or the subject's own decision, and it's not the decision of this body, because we're about due process, and whatever happens, let that happen. But we are about making sure that all the information is put before this committee. So with that being said, I naturally assume that Senator Kunesh moves that the subcommittee defer action on this matter until July 25th at 11 o'clock and authorize the body to advance this meeting if new information becomes available before July 25th. Is that your motion?
Mr. Chair, that is my motion.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails, and the Senate will, the subcommittee will meet again on July 25th at 11 o'clock unless there's a reason to advance the meeting because new information becomes available. With that being said, I want to make sure I make one other announcement. Is this: we since the last hearing, before we adjourned, I wanted to make note that of one item that during our last hearing, which was on May 7th, we went into executive session. The recording of that session will be available to the public after this complaint has been fully resolved. I want folks to know that that's the rule, because some people have asked about it, about getting it right away, and that's the rule. And this is consistent with past practices of the subcommittee. And so I just wanted to announce that so that the public was on the same page with us. With that being said, and there being no further business on the agenda, the committee stands adjourned until the date and time as articulated by the motion. Thank you.